Target, maximum firepower.
Brace for impact!
Welcome to the Brace for Impact podcast, where we tell you how to be better at Star Wars Armada. Today we're going to analyze a few of our last battle reports and discuss activation advantage and player bids. So to kick us off, we've had a couple of battle reports go up this month. The first one was Fortress of Solitude versus the Icebreaker, which is match 6 on our YouTube. What did you think of this battle?
This one, obviously I was running the SSD, and I think I had a pretty good deployment. But this was a game where I failed to acknowledge that I needed to stop focusing so hard at the objective and just turn right in for the kill. So I think in this one, I lost the game around round 2 when I turned my big Super Star Destroyer front arc away from the Starhawk, and then you just got several clean double arcs on my side after that, and then it just slowly tore me apart.
The objective on this one kind of baited you, right? You wanted to, and you always tend to play your list with a plan, right? So your plan going in was I'm going to lay these obstacles so that my Super Star Destroyer can, on turn 1, kind of get into position to snag all 3 of them and score 45 points right away. But stepping back and thinking okay, this is 2 ISDs instead of 1 Super Star Destroyer. In no world would you have turned one of your ISDs away from the fight on turn 1.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
It just never would have happened. You would have thrown it in there for the kill. And considering the power in the front arc of the Super Star Destroyer and how close that game was, I think delaying the turn by 1 more round would have been a win for you. I don't really see myself winning that game if you got another full front arc shot on my fleet.
I just feel like I failed to fully grasp that it was a Starhawk, just a single Starhawk with 2 flotillas versus a Star Destroyer with 2 flotillas, which means that I should have just gone straight forward and just ram smashed, not let you turn away until I get as many front arc shots in you as I can. And really, it just came down to the fact that you got more double arcs than I did. You rolled more dice than I did, and so I lost. And basically, when you're at that kind of point where you have one flagship versus another flagship, the objective points, unless you have a significant swing, they don't really matter. I got 1, 2, 3. I got 4 of the objective tokens by the end of the game, but that's not worth a whole Super Star Destroyer.
Right. Especially with a fleet that has just 1 fighting ship, right? You had 2 flotillas and some squadrons, and I had 2 flotillas and some
squadrons. We had almost
the
exact same style of list as a flagship and a couple flotillas and some squadrons. I mean, you had significantly better and more expensive squadrons, but I think the makeup of it was really similar.
Right. I got as close to building a Super Star Destroyer for the Rebels as I could, and then filled the gap with squadrons compared to your list, right? So, but really, what that means is all that mattered was which flagship died, because the whole list deletes itself.
Yeah.
Right? Which isn't the normal case, right? So suiciding into someone's flagship isn't always a smart move. But if you guys both only have 1 ship, whoever knocks out the other one first insta-wins. So, identifying that quickly and deciding the 45 points of the objective don't matter. Killing the flotillas don't matter. Killing the squadrons really don't matter, except for the fact that would prevent you from taking damage or improve your activation advantage. But really the only thing that mattered was who killed who first, the Starhawk or the SSD.
Yeah, I think my plan for this game would have worked better if I was flying against a more normal fleet, where it's not always guaranteed that if you kill a ship, then the entire match is done.
Right.
But I just think that not realizing that cost me the game.
Yeah, and a Starhawk at gate commander, like 6 defense tokens, did the best job any ship could do of limiting the Palpatine officer advantage of like making me spend defense tokens to shoot you. So yeah, I was double arcing you and getting 2 shots and theoretically spending 2 defense tokens a turn, but they were 2 salvos. Like they were basically extra defense tokens on top of 4 standard defense tokens.
Yeah, and my list was built around like using the salvo token from local fire control, using Riva Domain to tap it back so I can get like more attacks off, because that's one of the weaknesses of the SSD is that, it's 1 activation, 3 attacks, instead of 2 separate ISDs that have 4 attacks between them. So I was going in with this list thinking, all right, I'm going to use Palpatine. I'll get attacked. They'll spend a defense token. Attack me. Maybe they'll get a double arc. Probably pretty likely because, SSD's big motherfucker. And then attack back with local fire control 1 or 2 times. And you didn't let that happen. You effectively shut down like a good portion of my list just from smart accuracy choices.
Well, the Super Star Destroyer basically has so many defense tokens that 1 accuracy can quickly become none accuracy. 2 brace, 2 redirect, I think a contain, and then you switch to another contain for a salvo, right? So if you roll an attack on a Super Star Destroyer with that token setup, and you get 1 accuracy, which, like, it's not that common to get more than 1 accuracy unless you're specifically teching for it.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? Accuracy 1 of their brace tokens, then they just use the other one? And then, yeah, it was just absurd. And then, like, I'm not accuracying a contain when I'm doing shield damage, right? I'm accuracying a salvo. So, and then, like, I think I had XX9s, so, like, your contain can't affect that. So I only had really 1 target for my accuracy, and I just prevented the salvo as many times as possible. And if I hadn't, I would have died because that SSD got my Starhawk down to like 1 HP or something.
Yeah, it got really close. And I was also like, this is one of the few times I've ever run an SSD, and so I'm just really poor at positioning it and planning where it goes. So I think like round 1, like I moved my Gazanti up. But then that really made it so that my SSD, like, even if I had Jezrod, I can't turn it that hard. Because it'll just fucking land right on the Gazanti. I just needed...
Yep.
I needed a better... I needed more experience with how to move the SSD and where it can go on the table.
My big disappointment that game, and I would address it if I ever fly this list again, which I probably will. I really like Fortress of Solitude. I would probably try to get 1 more activation in there.
Oh, really?
By dropping a squadron or 2 and or dropping a couple of upgrades off of the Starhawk. Mm-hmm. I think 5 is like a good number. I really felt hamstrung by the fact that you and I both had 4 activations. So like trying to last first you was super difficult, and that was like the whole point of my list. And then I would also not probably fly the I'm going to slow you down to speed 0 and then shoot you and speed up
yeah, that was a change
again,
that you did to the Fortress of Solitude that I don't think really worked for you at all.
Yeah, I had a difficult time pulling it off against the Star Destroyer. And part of it might be that the SSD is just a lot harder to lock down than a normal ship. Like, I had raid, I had, slowdown effects. The idea was, like, prevent him from nabbing back up. That way it doesn't matter. Like, I'll eventually get to shoot it because I'm going to slow it to speed 0 and then block the nav command. But you were feeding tokens from your other ships. You would get a nav command, and you always get a token as well. So raid
nothing.
Basically does nothing.
It just reduces the effectiveness of my nav, which is kind of shitty.
Right. So, all of that combined made like the kind of the goal of my fleet not do what it was meant to do. But it was able to prevent you from doing what you wanted to do more.
Yeah.
Which is nice.
And this match was before I discovered the hyperspace migration cheesiness. I think if I were to run the Icebreaker again, I would run it with hyperspace migration.
Would you?
Yeah.
It has so few ships.
1, 2, 3, and then the SSD is so long you can just put the Purgles like right in the pocket and just bank those tokens. That's what? That's 60 tokens times 3?
Yeah. I don't know if it would be as good as with like a ship with a fleet with more ships in it, though.
Maybe not as good, but I mean, if I start the game and I have an almost guaranteed 180 point swing, and then you have to come at me all the way across, like I would lay the SSD on its side in the deployment zone, and then you've got to come all the way across the table, start shooting me turn 3, and then good luck killing the SSD, you know?
Yeah, I think you're a little bit obsessed with that objective right now.
I like how cheesy it is, and the fact that it just makes you not want to pick it once you learn what it's about.
Right. You have anything else on match 6?
No, I think the SSD, we might have an episode where we talk more about an SSD. I think it's a neat ship. I don't think it's very good. That's it. I don't think it's a very good ship. It's cool. I don't think it's better than 2 ISDs, which is what...
Meanwhile, I think the Starhawk is a very good ship.
I think the Starhawk is a very good ship, yeah.
And I think sometimes it is better than 2 ISDs.
Yeah. I think the Starhawk is good when it's lean and when it's Christmas treed out.
Yeah. Like with Whalix, ECM, a gate, like...
It's a pretty
APT,
mean ship, yeah.
Like, it can get disgusting and really like wreck some shit. Like you see it like kind of like put out a lot of damage on the Superstar Destroyer in that match. Yeah. But yeah, I'll bring a refined version of that list at some point with some changes based on what we learned in that battle. Mm-hmm. All right, what about match 7? This one just dropped today. This one is Heavy Duty versus the Ballista group. Mm-hmm. What did you think of this game?
This was another one of those games where I had an idea for a list. My plan kind of changed in deployment, but it still worked out like pretty well in my favor. A lot of things didn't go the way I wanted them to, but overall things worked as expected. What did you think about this game?
I'm of two minds about it.
You're of two minds? Well,
yeah. So on the one hand, I feel like my fleet didn't match up super well against your fleet. Mm-hmm. And I probably would not fly Heavy Duty in its current mix again. Didn't really love most of the list. I just have really been itching to fly Hammerheads and have them be fun and good. You know, same with the Pelta. You know, I feel like I've been all over the place in what I've wanted to fly, right? So you see some bombers in there and Dodonna, because I like Dodonna crits with bombers, and I got some Hammerheads in there because I kind of want to see them fly around, and you know, I really do love an MC-75, so it's kind of just like thrown together.
Not a lot of synergy in there with a lot of the components.
Yeah, it was just like, I want to fly a list of a bunch of stuff that I like. Mm-hmm. And I walked into Ballista Group, which is kind of a remix of Suicide Squad in the fact that it's 2 Raiders, 2 Architans, and then 1 more ship.
Mm-hmm. I'd say it's anti-Suicide Squad, because Suicide Squad wants to get in close, and this one doesn't.
Right. Because it's decap Raiders with a decap Victory.
And I just want to say, disposable capacitors on a Victory Star Destroyer is disgustingly good.
I will say, with 2 asterisks of against ships with no brace token and with gunnery teams. Like, it wrecked the Hammerheads because they were just taking 6 dice to the face at long range. You know, and there was not much they could do about it.
I just like being able to throw my full dice armament out at like long range and then do it again as we move in. It's like, god damn.
Decaps are super fun.
Decaps are so good.
I'm glad you brought gunnery team. I feel like you've been avoiding it because it's just so amazing.
Well, I just wanted to use like the salvo, and I really think that in the future we're either going to get a lot more variable defense token cards, like we've been seeing recently, like with Krista, with local fire control, other cards like Nita, where you can switch out a defense token for another one. I feel like we're going to be seeing a lot more of those and a lot more ship setups that'll have different defense token kits.
I hope so. But anyway, heavy duty, on the one hand, right, like I'm like, it wasn't a really well-designed list in my opinion. It wasn't flown super well. Like, watching the match, I'm like, those hammerheads were going in a little fast, getting deleted on round 2. They probably should have gone slower or approached differently. But then fire lanes, like, it's like, okay, if you're not going into the fire lanes, like, you're going to lose on points no matter what, right?
Fire lanes is a disgusting objective.
Yeah.
I feel like it wasn't balanced for stacking all the objective tokens on top of each other. You know, I feel like fire lanes should be like, you place them, you know, distance 4
There should have
away.
been a minimum distance between them.
Yeah, like I would say like distance 4 between them.
Like the minefield has a minimum distance between each mine.
I mean,
right?
it's like distance 1 or something, but I think the distance for fire lanes should be like 4 or 5 even, you know? It's just, you just stack them on top of each other, and then it's, all right, now you have to come here. I'm going to get 100,000 points before you can even attack, and then now you're at a disadvantage, and I've got you out of position. So, but yeah, I mean, it's a hard choice because I had...
Well, so minefield is minefield, they have to actually be distance 5 from each other mine.
Oh, do they?
Oh no, though the obstacles have to be distance 5 of each other obstacle, and then
mines are just like
the mines can be distance 1 of each other, but there's like a restriction on like how far apart the rocks are. So like if there was a restriction on fire lanes of like they have to be 3 apart or they have to be 4 apart, right? Because basically fire lanes is encouraging you to stack them in a group and then place all of your ships in front of it, and with all of their arcs pointed at 1 spot on the board as opposed to 3 spots on the board. I don't hate that in general, that like focus to the location on the battlefield where the battle takes place. I just don't think heavy duty was able to deal with it. I would have picked another objective card, but the other 2 I think would have been even worse for me. Obviously, that's why I picked fire lanes.
I agree.
Even thinking like this is my one mind about it, which is like not a great fleet, not battle tested, not on a great objective against a fleet that I feel like is put together pretty well. On the other hand, when I watch the battle and I look at the dice that I rolled out of those bombers, and if they had just rolled normal damage instead of, I think, like so many blanks.
Yeah. Dude, I was watching this match this morning, and I opened the game with 4 red dice, and then I get 2 natural double hits and TRC into a third double hit. That's my opening roll. Your opening roll is Luke, and you roll a blank. Right. And I'm like,
And that's honestly like the theme of most of that match. I think that the only ship of mine that ever did a good attack was the MC-75 against the Star Destroyer, where it basically one-shot it.
It pretty much, slapped it right off the board,
which felt really good. I don't want to sound greedy, but if it had done 1 more damage in the actual shot, so I didn't have to waste my movement on it, would have been preferred.
Yeah, because then you would have been in a better position.
I would have been able to catch the Architans with the MC-75, but like realistically, my 150 something points of MC-75 only did one thing, which was trade for your 150 points of Star Destroyer, and then didn't shoot at anything else or really do anything else.
Yeah,
in the entire match. So we were almost like playing a 250-point game, and I had a Pelta and 2 Hammerheads and 2 Squadrons against 2 Raiders and 2 Architans.
Well, after round 2, you had a Pelta. So
you can see my predicament.
Yeah.
The Hammerheads died because decaps is disgusting and your dice were disgusting. My Bombers really couldn't do anything because even though they had a shot every round after turn 1,
they had no
basically did no damage,
which I think is super important for Black Dice Bombers. It's rerolls.
Yeah, I don't know if I can ever run Black Dice Bombers without Bomber Command Center again.
Yeah.
And like Keen has built-in rerolls, right? I could just literally never got rid of the shields on the Architans. Even on turn 6, that Architan still had shields on multiple hull zones. Like,
yeah,
what the hell? And that was because like they just weren't taking damage, right? Like so many rounds of Luke and Kian whiffing, the MC-75 being way out of position because it wasted a whole turn bumping the Star Destroyer. The Hammerheads dying turn 2, so like they don't get to do any damage. Like it was just a mess.
Like you moved one of your Hammerheads in, it like threw a couple dice, and then you tapped the other Hammerhead, so it couldn't even attack. So it was like
yeah, that was kind of a disaster.
I feel like Hammerheads. I feel like they need to be in a different list. Like, if you have a Hammerhead with Dodonna, it should just be the Garel's Honor Hammerhead, and just one of them. I don't think trying to do the Task Force Hammerheads works.
And obviously, like, Garel's Honor with, like, X-Racks, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
And, I agree. Oh, we'll see. So, I don't know. Heavy duty, not super fun to fly. No, do not recommend.
We'll stamp it with
you want me to recommend
we'll stamp it with a is not complete. Heavy duty not.
The most fun list that I've flown so far on the for the whole show, of all the episodes, the most fun list that I've flown so far is Fleet of Justice, the Sato list. I think that's pretty well put together. There are a few tweaks I'll make if I bring it out of the hangar. But yeah, that list is pretty bad.
Oh yeah, Fleet of, yeah, I remember this one. Yeah. It is so good. The Salvation obnoxiousness, yeah.
Yeah, I want to put opening salvo as the objective on it the next time I fly it.
Yeah, so if you were to remake Fleet of Justice, like what would you do for it?
I would switch out a squadron for Ketsu, I think. Just because I think Bomber Rogue with 2 blue dice is very, very strong.
What would you switch out? Because you don't have very much in the way. Like, you wouldn't switch out Char or Tycho, obviously. Would you switch out Rogue Squadron for Ketsu?
Okay, let me see. So I would probably take.
Because you've got GR-75 with Tor and Far, right? Or do you? Oh, this is the list. Yeah,
no GR-75.
GR-75, yeah.
Yeah, it feels really thin, doesn't it?
It does.
But it works really well.
Really thin, yeah.
Han, I think, becomes Lando.
Oh yeah, but Han was really good because at the start of the ship phase he can move.
Yeah, it's not that. It's good, but it's
not that good.
Lando's just changing a red die to a double hit.
And Lando is
twice.
way cheaper.
3 points, yeah. So I'd change Han to Lando. That would give me 3 more points. If I had to swap a squadron, I would probably swap. I don't know. I might drop Shara for Ketsu.
Really?
And that would put me at an even 400.
Mm.
Shara is fine. She's great.
She's amazing if you get into a squadron entanglement.
Yes. Although, yes, you're right. I don't know. I need to think about it more because this list is.
It's very.
There's not a lot of
tight. Yeah.
Yeah, there's not a lot of changes that can even be made. It's making me look at the assault frigate and think, like, should Sato be on something else and save Mike, a few more points. I guess you'll have to see the next time I fly it what the changes are. All right, let's try segment 2. Talk about activation advantage and first and second player bid. So I guess the question I want to pose to you is how important is activation advantage, and how do you think about activation advantage when you're building a fleet?
Yeah, activation advantage is super important when, I mean, you want your ships to do damage when you want them. Like, if you out deploy your opponent and you have a bunch of squadrons and only like 3 ships, I mean, you really have to go hard on squadrons if you want to do any significant damage early on, because your like big ISD is not going to be in the right position to fire on the opponent's ships when they get there.
Yeah. And I know in the last episode we talked about deployment advantage and wanting to be at like 4 to 6 deployments, you know. However, once the deployment phase is over, you know, the advantage of the person who has deployment advantage kind of ends there, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's made his decisions about deployment, taken advantage of his deployment advantage, positioned himself better maybe than you did. And now that's locked in. And the rest of the game proceeds. And you don't get to continue drawing from your deployment advantage really on round 1, 2, 3. You know,
Yeah.
like activation advantage is different. If you have more activations than your opponent, you get more activations than your opponent every round for the whole game. So that puts your opponent in a difficult situation of, you know, maybe they have an Imperial Star Destroyer and they really don't want to move it into range of your, you know, Defiance.
Yeah.
But they're moving at speed 2 and you have 2 more activations than them, or even just, you know, 1 more activation than them in your you know, whatever. They have to move it into range of Defiance, and then Defiance will shoot it. And because the game is shoot and then move, the person who moves last gets to shoot and then move out of range. Or the person who moves last, right? Or the reverse, right? Like Defiance doesn't, like Defiance is the type of ship to like, it shoots at you and then kind of moves out of range, right? But there are other ships that like, you know, an MC-30, he wants to be out of range. You come into his range, he shoot you, and then he, you know, is moving across your bow or behind you or something like that. Like, because I have an activation advantage, every round of the game, my ships can move with, like you said, more knowledge. They can move in a position that I know, you know, maybe they can't get shot at. I can get out of range, right? Like, I can force the hand of my opponent because I have more ships, even if it's just 1 more ship.
Yeah. Or move with more information than the opponent. Like, that's really what we're getting at.
Yeah, it's very, very important. And when I build a fleet, I always am thinking, how many activations does this fleet have? Does it need more? Is it enough? You know, generally, you want to have 3 to 5 activations, and the more the better, right?
I would say 3 is on the low end. You want 4 to 5.
Yeah, if you have 3, you better have like, I guess, good reason for it. Like, why aren't you?
Yeah.
Like, if you have 3, right, you're probably like SSD with 2 Gazantes, and then you're thinking, okay, why am I not putting Strategic Advisor? Or I guess with SSD you have Pass Token, right? So you get 4.
Yeah.
But
yeah, so SSD with 2 Gazantes gets it in the range of like 4,
yep,
which is on the lower end, but not 3. Like the difference between 3 activations is 4 is actually like super significant.
Yep.
It's the difference between being able to shoot a ship with your big ISD and not being able to shoot it once, and then it moves in front of you and then attacks you again and moves away.
Yeah.
So it's the difference between attacking a ship and not ever attacking it and probably just dying right there.
So, you know, when you're thinking about building your fleet, obviously more points spent is higher likelihood to have more activations, right? But sometimes you want to bid for either first player or second player, and that plays into activation advantage, right? Second player, you know, with equal number of ships, second player goes last, quote unquote, so gets that activation advantage of forcing their opponent into the position that they want them to be in. But first player gets the advantage of, well, shooting first, right? And so if you kill something when you shoot first, it doesn't get to go. You know, it's the classic example of the best defense is a good offense, where I shoot you and kill you, and now you can't shoot me back. So, haha, right?
Yeah.
So you don't always want to build to the max points value, and sometimes you're like, oh, I want a 5-point bid or I want a 10-point bid because I'm building a fleet that wants to go first, or I'm building a fleet that wants to go second, or I'm building a fleet that doesn't really care. Those are, in my opinion, a little bit trickier.
So you're saying that like during list building, you're thinking about whether your list wants to go first or second.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Sometimes I'll build a fleet that doesn't care, about second, wants to go first, and I put a lot less thought into how my fleet interacts with the objectives.
Yeah.
Because
I mean, if you're going first, sometimes you have to make a call on whether or not you're even going to go for the objective at all,
right.
And whether or not you're just going to point all your guns on target and just see if you can wipe them off the table.
Right, like Fortress of Solitude would have won its game if you didn't think about the objective.
Yeah, I was just planning for a different outcome, and it didn't happen.
So let's talk about a fleet that wants to go first.
Okay.
If I'm building a list, and I actually like to build fleets that want to go second, but fleets that want to go first are typically ships with a strong, single, powerful activation, an Imperial fleet with an ISD, or a Demolisher, or a Rebel fleet with like a MC-30 with APTs and all the jazz, or some sort of a hammer that wants to hit something so hard that it kills it, and then kind of flies off into the distance, right? Demolisher being, I think, the prime example of how to take maximum advantage of first player. Let's assume you have activation advantage and your first player. If that's the case, that means you go first and you can go last. So maybe on turn 2, your Demolisher's out of range of your target. You move in, shoot, because you can shoot after you move one time with Demolisher. And then
that ability is busted as fuck.
It's busted. And then on the next turn, your first player, so you activate Demolisher immediately again. Nobody's had a chance to do anything in between those 2 moments in time. Shoot 2 more times at the enemy, and then move again. And at no point did that ship have the ability to shoot back at Demolisher before it shot 3 times and then moved out of whatever arc is the most scary of the enemy ship, or the ship's just dead, right? Because the
ship will probably be dead if you triple tap with demo,
right? Especially
if you have it kitted out properly. Like if you have APTs, that's
ordnance experts,
whatever damage you're doing,
yeah,
+1 for the damage, because APT doesn't change it to a crit. It gives an additional damage card that is face up,
right,
to whatever else other damage is done. If you do that 3 times to a ship, it's probably dead. Not much can survive that. Right.
And demo gets to do that multiple times a game, right? It's not just like, oh, one time and then like he's done. You're first player with activation advantage. You get to do this every round. So
yeah,
keeping that kind of stuff in mind when you're building your list is super important. So I would say more generally, like if I have fleets with ships that throw black dice or a bunch of black dice, that's another sign to me that maybe I want to go first, because black dice ships have to be closer, which means I want to manipulate where I am on the board versus my opponent more, or I want to make sure I get the shot, and a lot of times making sure you get the shot means go first, because let's say I'm second player. This has happened to me before against you, by the way, and I've got an MC-30 torpedo frigate, and I'm second player. I move him last because I don't want him to get shot at before he can get in range. So you shoot your stuff. I move into range, right, of a ship. I move into range of a gladiator or an Architans or whatever. You're first player. The next turn, you activate the ship that is threatened the most and then fly it away as quickly as possible. And now my torpedo frigate has no target.
And now it's out of position.
And now it has to spend its turn shooting at nothing or shooting just a couple of blue dice, which nobody wants to be doing with an MC-30. And then he moves to another target, right? Because I'm doing a good job. I'm navving. I'm making sure I can get my ship on target. On the next turn, you move that ship first and out of range, right? So you can have an MC30 as second player running around the board, and all the ships are scattering. The only way you can really deal with that is to either position it so you have multiple targets in black dice range on the same turn, or you take first player.
Yeah, I think with the scenario you're talking about of being second player and moving a black die range ship in position and waiting and preparing to get the shot, like all that's possible while you're second player. You can certainly set up a scenario where you have one ship that rolls black dice and you have another ship, and you bait the opponent into position, and you can make it happen as second player. But you're living with the cost of not having been first player. That's putting you at a positional disadvantage from being second player and having ships that just can't attack with their full armament all the time.
Right.
I mean, that's what we're talking about here. Like when I build a list and I see a ship that has more than like a couple black dice, I'm trying to bid for first.
Yeah.
Because even just 2 or 3 black dice, I mean, if I'm running a ship with 3 black dice, I'm bidding hard for first, no matter what.
Yeah.
And I'll decide if I want second, depending on what other list I'm flying against. But most likely, if I have a single ship, one ship in my fleet has 3 black dice, I'm going first. I'll spend 10 points, 15 points for it. Like, I have to have it.
Right.
3 black dice is game-changing on one ship. It's game-changing.
So let's talk about a fleet that wants to go second. If you're wanting to go second, either you are assuming your opponent will bid for first and maxing out your points, or you're assuming your opponent will bid for second and you're also trying to bid for second. I think, at least where we play, most people don't bid for second, because second is usually disadvantageous unless you have a list that knows who it is, in its heart of hearts. This is a fleet with a bomber wing that, we brought superior positions and precision strike and, maybe fighter ambush or, some squadron friendly objectives, and we really want to use them, and our opponent's going to bid for first, so we'll max out to 400 points and we'll take second, right? When I build a fleet that wants to go second, if I'm halfway through list construction and I don't already know what my 3 objectives cards are, I rethink it. Like, it should be
rethink the whole fleet at that
inherent to the entire strategy. If you're going second, that your objectives are giving you like 150 points worth of advantage, because that's, in my opinion, almost how much first player can be worth. If they're playing first player well, it's like you got to make up for it somehow. You always have to think, I'm second player. How am I making up for the disadvantage? How am I making up for the fact that my opponent can choose every single turn their most threatened ship to shoot me and then fly away?
Yeah, you either have to think about objectives as how many points can this objective give me during the course of the game that can make up for not having first player, or how can this objective get me in a better position to deal with first player than any other objectives.
Right. I think a lot of like fighter heavy lists like to go second. There's a little bit of an advantage there where like if we each have 4 fighters and they're just activating in the squadron phase, the person who engages, like who doesn't engage, is the one who gets to shoot, right? One person flies in but can't shoot, the second person can shoot, right? Like going second is good.
Yeah.
I think in general going second is good with squadrons, except in specific scenarios.
I think squadrons like second player inherently more than other lists because, I mean, squadrons have their own round.
Right.
They have the squadron phase. So it doesn't matter if you're going second or first or about your activation advantage. If you have squadrons that haven't attacked this round, well, at the end, they still get to attack and or move.
Right. And then there are some fleets that don't much care, I think, about first or second player. And these are...
Yeah, I think those fleets are harder to build than fleets that want specifically to go for first or second.
Right. With
I
this
think it's harder to have an all-round fleet.
with this
like
fleet,
that.
you go for like a 5 or so point bid, I think. Right? Like
Yeah, 5-ish
7.
bid, you know.
You know, you're just bidding a little bit so that like when you come up against someone who bids a full 400, like you can kind of decide based, like, you know, if you come against someone with a 400 point list with a fighter wing, like, you know, they really want to be second, probably, right? They really probably want you to pick superior positions or precision strikes. So like you could just take second away from them and kind of make them sad about it if you wanted to. It gives you the option, and the option is sometimes its own power.
Yeah, like if they only have 3 ships and then the rest of their list is like squadrons, like maybe you just take that shit from them, set up your fire lanes, and the squadrons can't interact with that objective at all, and you know, maybe that will give you an advantage. I still think going first in that scenario can be beneficial, but that's really like a mulligan call you have to make while you're looking at your opponent, you know?
Yeah.
So like how much do you bid for a fleet? Like if you want to go first or second?
First, I think anything up to I think for first 20 points is too much, and anything under 20 point bid is okay.
I agree. Because like once you're getting to 20 points, then you start affecting your activation and deployment advantage, because that's like 2 squadrons or an entire GR75. And if you don't have those slots like filled already and you're bidding 20 points, it's probably better to take a GR75. Well, GR75s are only like 18 points, right?
Right. And that's kind of why that threshold for me is right there, because
yeah, because 20 points is another GR75 with CommsNet, which can inherently be better than a 20-point bid for first.
Because I'm getting that activation on the back end,
yeah.
right? Like if I'm bidding 25 points and I could have had one more activation, and then my special ship that I really want to go first is like forced to come into range of something before it wants to, I'm losing that advantage basically, right? I'm taking a hit when I didn't want to. So that's kind of the max for first player. Most of the time
I would say around that is like the threshold for me as well, because whenever I'm like, you know, thinking about my bid, it's always around like a little over 16 to 20 points is like, that's around too much for me, because that's about the cost of a couple TIE fighters. Once I get past like a 16-point bid, that's when I'm like, I could have another deployment. And for Empire, deployment advantage, I think is much better to have.
When you put your Star Destroyer down, you don't want them to put their ship down afterwards, typically.
Exactly.
Beyond that, a lot of times my specific number of points that I'm bidding, quote unquote, is in general determined by like if I want to bid hard or not. But sometimes, like with the Fleet of Justice, it has a bid of like 2 points, and this was only because I couldn't find 2 points worth of something I wanted to add. Right?
Yeah.
Like I wasn't gonna just throw Hondo in there for just to throw it in there, right? Like it didn't really make sense with the list, so I didn't.
You don't have Hondo in Fleet of Justice? Why are you talking to me?
I roll.
Hondo's the best boy, dude. He's the best.
Sometimes you just get to a number of points that you think is reasonable, and you don't try to make your fleet worse in your mind just to reach a threshold bid. Like sometimes you build it to what you build it to, and you know, if I'm bidding 4 points or 5 points, like I'm not going to reconfigure my list to get to 6 point bid, right? Because a lot of times I don't build my list to go first. So I'm just building my list to what I think is reasonable. And if I have a couple point bid, that's how it worked out. Great.
I think it's better to have a 398 or 399 point list than an exact 400 point list. Because then if you're flying against another list that wants to go second and they have 400 points, that's not that big of a difference to really affect the game, like a 20-point bid versus a 400-point fleet. And then you can just bid and just take second from them.
Right.
From a fleet that doesn't have a bid at all.
Exactly.
So I think doing that is much better than, like you said, putting Hondo in to fill out your fleet to 400.
just to do it. For me, that's not.
Yeah,
That's not
because I
something
mean,
I do.
eventually, if you fly a fleet long enough, eventually you're going to come across a list where you're like, oh shit, I have to have second for this because he's got a shitload of squadrons. He's probably got fighter ambush, strategic positions, and precision strike. And then you can just deny that from them and deal your objectives.
Exactly. Okay, so I think one thing we haven't talked about with activation advantage is there are some cards that influence your activations, namely
Yeah.
Strategic Advisor, Bale, and Governor Pryce. And, I'll caveat this by saying it seems like they won't be relevant in 2 months with Armada 1.5 and the Clone Wars and the new card set and all of that jazz. It looks like this is going to be end of life and replaced with pass tokens for everyone. But if you're planning on playing Armada in the next 2 months, pay attention to the rest of this. And if you're not, this is the end for you, my friend.
Well, it's still good to understand how to use these cards and what advantage they give you, because I mean they're not just getting burned up; they're getting replaced by something. So the advantage that these cards are giving you, it's probably good to think about that, so that going forward, when we just get pass tokens inherently in whatever kits, I mean, what that's good for.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. So the first one, Strategic Advisor, large ship only. When it's your turn to activate, you may exhaust this card to pass your turn. Your opponent activates a ship instead. This came out because for a while MSU was making larger ships basically not worth it because the activation advantage was just so great that they could force your ISD into a position to get then chain attacked by like 5 corvettes, and there was really nothing you could do about it. So giving large ships an activation for just 4 points kind of really brought them into the game more.
Mm-hmm.
This
is one of like my favorite cards.
It's a great card.
Come out recently. It's so good. It really affects the game in a significant way, but in like a positive way, and not like in a negative way.
Yeah, I would say for the most part, yes. When your Star Destroyer sees a threat ahead, Strategic Advisor, wait it out. Wait till the stuff moves into your, front arc of your gunnery team's ISD2 with XI7s and then once the target is there, then you activate. And what's great is, it's a May card, right? So Strategic Advisor on turn 1, on turn 2, maybe even turn 3, you're definitely using this because, there's no targets in range yet or whatever. Or you're afraid you're going to move into the arc of something you don't want to move into. But on a turn where, maybe you're first player and there's the enemy, you don't do it and you just go, right? So it's really nice to have that flexibility with him, and he's a staple card on large ship lists that don't have very many activations and want to get to like we talked about, like at least 4.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that like we've all played against matches where each player has Strategic Advisor, and maybe sometimes you both do the double tap for round 1 and 2, and then no one uses Strategic Advisor for the rest of the game. But it's important to remember to use Strategic Advisor to your advantage, even in the case where you each have Strategic Advisor, because you can sometimes press their ship, their large ship, to go first that has Strategic Advisor on it. Maybe you've got it out of position, and now you get a bonus activation that they've missed out on because they forgot to tap their Plo Koon guy.
Right. Gotta love Plo Koon.
And then maybe you kill their ship that's holding Strategic Advisor. Now you got double activation advantage. It's great.
It's great.
It's just a great card. Cheap at 4 points, for sure.
Speaking of cards that may or may not be great, we have Bale Organa next. Medium or large ship only. After deploying fleets, you may place 1 round token on this card at the start of the ship phase of the round, matching that round token. If you are the second player, you must activate. If you are the first player, you may gain up to 2 command tokens of your choice. Okay, so Bale, the idea behind Bale is for 1 round, second player gets to go first. And we spent a lot of this podcast talking about how great going first is. So you have...
And having activation advantage going last and then going first.
Right.
Is very good.
So, 1 out of 6 turns you're going first. That's great. Nobody cares about going first on turn 1, really. A lot of battles I see don't care about going first on turn 2 that much. Turn 3, 4, and 5 are a different story, and going first can really make a difference. If you know what turn you want to engage the enemy on, setting Bale down on that turn can be a huge advantage. It gives second player a chance to last first someone if they have activation advantage. Maybe use this for a Yavaris into Yavaris activation where you're double tapping 3 bombers 2 times in a row on a single ship and completely nuking a Star Destroyer. Maybe you're using it for an MC-30 torpedo frigate to go first on a turn where it really wants to, or MC-80 or a Starhawk. This is a really, really, really interesting card for sure.
Now, saying that it's interesting is all well and good, but I don't think it's very good at all.
Right. Because the 2 best examples I could think of were on ships that this card cannot go on. He can only go on medium ships and large ships.
Which means he can only go on large ships because you're not putting him on an assault frigate.
Right. So
why would you do that?
You could put him on a Starhawk, you could put him on an MC-75
It's 7 points and it takes up the officer slot, which is one of the most highly contested Rebel upgrade slots.
Right.
And I would take Strategic Advisor over Bail Organa every time. The only reason I would take Bail Organa is if I'm trying to do some cheeky shit with a large MC-75 that has black dice. And I know I want to go second for some reason, and I'm building around a black dice ship in a second player fleet, and I already have Strategic Advisor.
Right.
Then I would take Bale, but then after we do all that, now I have a bad fleet that doesn't synergize with itself.
Right.
So
he also can't be on a fleet that doesn't deploy during the deployment phase of the beginning of the game, if
so hyperspace assault.
Right. Can't Radis him in.
And
none of that.
Can't Radis him in. He doesn't work with Radis, which is I understand why that doesn't work. It would be cool. He would be cooler if he was on if he could be on a small ship and no other ships, he'd be amazing. Yeah,
I'm not entirely sure why that restriction is so important for him.
Probably because of the MC-30.
Probably because of Yavaris.
Probably because of all that shit, It's I don't want to live in a world where Yavaris can last first me.
I'm just happy.
Without question.
I'm actually happy this card is going away, so I don't have to think about anymore whether or not he's good.
I would just rather he get reprinted into a better card. His ability is not good. Not good for what he is, what upgrade he is, and how much he costs.
Right.
And his restrictions. And then it's if you somehow lose the bid, and then you don't get second player, and you're first player, you just get 2 command tokens?
On 1 turn. Okay.
On 1 turn? It's
really bad.
Alright. It's just better to not put this card in your list and have a 7-point bid.
Fail. Right, because then you're just going first every round.
Then you're just going for it's just better not. The only reason you run him is if you're trying to do some cheeky shit with a large ship that has black dice.
Right.
And you already have Strategic Advisor, and you're planning to go second.
It's just too I need to set up the perfect scenario, and then this amazing thing will happen. But when you get into the heat of battle, your perfect scenario is unlikely to happen because your opponent looks at Bale and sees what number token is on him and says, I will make sure that the ship with Bale is not near one of my ships on that round.
Exactly.
Okay. Fun. Right? It's just... Yeah. Anyway.
And look, we sound super negative about this, but this is one of those cards that I dislike. Not because I think it can never work. It's just I don't build fleets around abilities that might only work sometimes. I build a fleet. I want that fleet to synergize every single round, every single game, no matter what fleet I'm playing against.
Right.
That's what I want. I don't want Bale where I play 10 games and it works so fantastically amazing twice out of those 10 games.
Right.
That's not a good card to me.
I agree. Governor Pryce, medium or large ship only. After deploying fleets, you may place 1 round token on this card. If you do, during the round matching that round token, you must activate at the end of the ship phase after all other ships have activated.
Now, I think that Governor Pryce is better than Bale because her ability is kind of different, but also because she is for the Empire. And Empire just has like less activations than the Rebel fleet. Like inherently, like their ships are just more expensive.
Yeah.
It's just a fact. And medium ship is not restrictive like Bale is. We've got the Interdictor, we got Victories, we got Quasars. You know, we actually have medium ships instead of our medium ship is the assault frigate and nothing else.
Yeah.
You know? Whose idea was that? But like putting her on a large ship like an ISD and just being able to stall it in like round 2 or 3, that can be incredibly good. I mean, that's all I have to say. Like, I mean, she has a cool ability. My only problem with her is like I would have to make a list that uses her and uses her well, and then fly that fleet several dozen times before I'm used to her and can really utilize like how good her ability is. And I don't know if I would want to fly a fleet like that many times. Like that would be so much better having her in it than just having something else like Strategic Advisor.
The way that Governor Pryce is good, I think, is, you know, you want to be first player.
Mm-hmm.
And the turn that you set down for Pryce ahead of time, which is always the trick, right?
Yeah.
Your ship is basically sitting there waiting for the enemy to get in range, you know? So like the ideal circumstance for Governor Pryce is like, I don't know, an ISD2 that, you know, at the beginning of the turn wasn't really in range of, you know, 2 rebel ships, but because you had Governor Pryce, every single one of them had to move into blue dice range, and you have gunnery teams, and then you activate Governor Pryce, and you blow up 2 of them, and then move in at the end of the round, and then you're first player, so it gets to activate a second time immediately afterwards, and then blows up 2 more rebel ships, and then, you know, 1 forward to victory after that, and the game is basically over, right? Like that's the wow, Governor Pryce could be so good if that happened every single game. But guess what? Just like with Bale, like this doesn't happen every single game for you. Like your opponent will know, like your opponent can see the number that you put on Governor Pryce, just like Bale, and knows like, okay, the ISD is going to want to do this on turn 3. So let's make sure we aren't near it. Like that's it. Like these kinds of cards just have too much counterplay from your opponent versus something like Strategic Advisor that they can't do anything about. Like you just Strategic Advisor and they have to go again.
Yeah, that's really a good point. Is like Strategic Advisor, the most counterplay your opponent has is having their own Strategic Advisor.
Yep.
That's the only thing that they can do about it. Also, like, you know, killing the ship.
Like, imagine if Governor Pryce and Bale were discard effects that you could just do once a game whenever you wanted. And they would be insane.
I don't know about that. I mean, that's...
Right. You're thinking in your head right now, wow, if it was like that, they would both be ridiculously good auto-includes on every good list, right?
10 points. They'd have to be 10 points.
Right. They
couldn't be 7 points. They would have to be so much more expensive.
What FFG chose as the restriction at the beginning of the game, placing a token that tells everyone when it's going to happen. I don't want my opponent to know what I'm going to do, the thing I'm going to do. I want to do the thing I'm going to do, and they, you know, aren't able to prepare the entire game for it. Like, what are they just supposed to forget that Bale's gonna make your Starhawk go first on turn 4? Like, no. Turn 3, they're moving everything away. That's it.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I would say that like these cards we're talking about, like Pryce is significantly better than Bale. Like she has more of a home to live in. But all right, so like, what would we rate these cards? Like Strategic Advisor, like what grade do you give that?
out of what, like 5 stars or like 1 to 10 or
No, like A, B, C.
oh, ABC.
Like
Strategic Advisor is an A. That's an A card in one of the most important slots in the game, officer slot. A card.
Oh, and another important thing, like if you're running a list with a single large ship, you have to have a very specific plan if you're not taking Strategic Advisor.
Yeah.
Like I would auto include this in single large ship fleets. Like if you have a large ship and a couple other small ships, like your officer on the large ship should be Strategic Advisor. Unless you must have that officer. It's just so much better that way.
I agree.
I agree that Strategic Advisor is an A.
Bale and Pryce, I think I hear what you're saying about Pryce. I actually don't think she's better than Bale.
You don't?
No.
I think she's better than Bale because she's in a different faction. She's for Empire, so she's better. And her ability to go last helps the Empire more than Bale's ability to go first.
I say Bale is a D and Pryce is a D+.
I say Bale's an F. It's like pay points to get an effect of first player, but by spending those points, you don't have first player every round. It's like he's like a trap. He's a trap card. You use him if you're doing like cheeky shit, and cheeky shit doesn't win games all the time. It'll win games some of the time.
Enough to make you want to keep playing your cheeky shit that isn't that good.
I guess. I'd say Pryce is like a C plus.
Wow.
She's in a weird spot for me because like I haven't used her very much, and when I've used her, it's really only in like Sloan lists that I put her in, which I think is her home. But I don't think Sloan lists are very amazing.
Yeah.
Like they'll win a game, but a lot of like so many people have played against Sloan lists and have just gotten used to what that list does. I mean, you either smash a list really hard or you get a tie. Most of the time, you just end up tying.
You just end up tying most of the time, you think, with Sloan?
With Sloan, like it, I've run that list so many times, and it just doesn't absolutely decimate the other person. It just doesn't. I can never pick up all their shit from the table. It kind of makes me want to play a Sloan list for some of our next battle reports because I'm so off on it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll fly Fortress of Solitude and you guys can chew through my 70 defense tokens.
I know, right? It's like...
Does Sloan get the pick which token gets flipped?
Yeah.
It feels so good. Just feels so good.
It feels so good, but I don't know. Whenever I've played it, it hasn't been amazing.
The biggest problem with the Sloan list, I think, is like the Quasar doesn't have the stamina.
Yeah, it doesn't have the gumption.
And if you come up against a actual scary like squadron list, like with real aces in it, you actually get destroyed,
yeah.
Right? Like, imagine Fleet of Justice versus any Sloan list, right? Like, Char just drops into the middle of the TIE fighters. You know, Han is just like nuking shit. Like, it's just not a good time when you don't have very many defense tokens on your squadrons and you're just getting blown to hell.
You send in all the squadrons and then I get absolutely eaten and then you just flak, and it's like the problem with Sloan is like it makes you want to run a bunch of ties.
Yeah.
But I don't think having a lot of ties is a very good setup. And I mean, I know that list can work. I've seen it work. It's just most of the time I found that you go even and like your just games aren't very exciting.
Or I wonder if maybe in the past year or so, people have come up with better squadron compositions for Sloane that are more effective against like a Riken fleet, you know?
Maybe.
Something to
It makes
consider.
me want to fly a Sloan list. I need to paint some ties. Also, ties are boring to paint, and that's why I haven't flown Sloan very much. All right, so what are you flying next? What's your next fleet, man?
I don't know.
What was that noise? You don't know? We're doing the Halloween episode next, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So what are you flying?
I'm flying a Riken fleet, actually.
Yeah? Lovely. Everyone loves Riken.
Look, I haven't flown him yet. He is a very good commander. He will be very, very fun for me to fly. For the first time in like 2 years, flying Riken.
Yeah.
What about you? What are you flying?
I'm running a single ISD list, and the whole point is like every other component of the list just pours into the ISD. So it's like I've got Interdoctor, I've got Hand of Justice Architins, I've got Gazanti with CommsNet, and it's just going to be the ISD just running in there and just being an unstoppable force.
Sounds good. Can't wait to see
That's
it.
good. Halloween episode next.
Yep, Halloween episode next.
All right. Well, that's it. Bye-bye.
Ta-ta for now.